The first time I saw it, I told myself it was the building settling. That's what everyone says about noises in places that are too big and too empty. Expansion and contraction, pipes, ducts, old concrete shifting like it's dreaming. It's a comforting lie because it keeps the blame on physics instead of intent. But the emergency exit didn't sound like the building settling. It sounded like a decision. I was 3 nights into the job when the sign above the door flickered from dead green to an angry, clinical glow. The corridor lights didn't change. The air didn't change. Only that sign, steady and certain, as if it had been switched on by a hand. Emergency exit. Beneath it, the door sat flush in the wall, steel, scuffed, with a horizontal panic bar and a little square window covered from the inside by a sheet of wired glass. The kind of door you forget exists until you need it. And if you need it, you're already having the worst day of your life. The glow made it look newly installed, like it had just been put there and the paint around it was still drying. I watched it for a long time from the security desk, the camera feed cycling on the monitors in front of me. Hallways, loading docks, stairwells, blind angles that always stayed blind no matter how many upgrades were promised. I worked nights because I didn't want to see people. I wanted quiet work, clear rules, simple tasks, night guard, walk rounds, check doors, log incidents, collect paycheck. My reasons for drifting into this job were unromantic. Divorce paperwork sitting like a weight on my kitchen table, rent climbing, pride drained. I needed cash, and I needed it fast. The recruitment guy had said, "Easy money," and smiled like it was a secret. The site was a corporate distribution hub, 2 main warehouses, 1 office block, and a service corridor that connected them like a vein. After hours, only a skeleton crew remained. The last forklift driver clocking out, a cleaning contractor, and me. My supervisor, an older guard named Keen, handed me the keys on my first night and told me the rules like he was reciting scripture. "Don't prop doors," he said. "Don't wander the loading floor after midnight. Don't use your phone in the stairwells. Don't go through any door marked emergency exit unless it's actually an emergency." I had laughed because it sounded obvious. Keen didn't smile. "And if the exit sign lights up on its own," he added, "you log it. You do not go and check it. You sit here and you wait for the sign to turn off." I stared at him. "Why wouldn't I check it?" Keen leaned closer, lowering his voice like there were microphones in the ceiling. "Because the exit isn't for you," he said. "After midnight, it belongs to something else." I wanted to ask what he meant, but I also wanted the job. I nodded like I understood and accepted the keys and the clipboard and the lie that all buildings are predictable. That night, nothing happened. The second night, nothing happened. On the third night, at 12:07 a.m., the exit sign lit itself. I leaned forward in my chair, the cheap plastic creaking under my weight. On the monitor, the corridor camera showed the door and the glowing sign. The hallway was empty, no shadows moving, no staff, no reason. I watched, the sign stayed on. At 12:11 a.m., the panic bar depressed, just a fraction, not slammed, not yanked, pressed smoothly, like someone who knew exactly how much force was needed. The door opened. Not wide, only a few inches, just enough for darkness to spill through the gap like breath. The corridor light didn't reach whatever was on the other side. The gap remained black, as if the door opened into something that wasn't a hallway at all. Then, slowly, something moved through. The camera didn't blur. The feed didn't glitch. The image stayed steady and clear, and still I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. It wasn't a person. It had the suggestion of shoulders, the suggestion of height, but no surface detail, no clothing, no skin, just a shape that seemed to be made of the absence of light, thickened and given posture. It passed through the gap without squeezing. It didn't need to. The door opened the correct width for it, as if it had measured itself beforehand. It stood in the corridor for a moment, and then it turned its head without turning its body and looked directly into the camera. I felt it, even through a screen, the pressure of attention, cold and patient. The shape held that angle for a full 5 seconds. Then it moved, not toward the building, toward the exit, back through the door. The door closed softly behind it, the panic bar returning to its neutral position like a mouth resealing. The sign above the door stayed lit for another minute, then dimmed back to nothing. The corridor returned to ordinary darkness. I sat frozen in my chair, with my hands flat on the desk, as if movement would make something notice me. My mouth had gone dry, my pulse hammered in my ears. On instinct, I reached for the radio. Then I remembered Keen's face, his tone, his certainty. The exit isn't for you. I didn't call anyone. I didn't go check. I did what I was told. I logged it. 12:07 a.m. Emergency exit sign activated. Door opened and closed. No staff observed. No alarm. My pen shook as I wrote, and when I finished, I stared at the line like it was proof I hadn't hallucinated the whole thing. At 1:18 a.m., the sign lit again. This time, I didn't lean forward. I didn't need to. I already knew the shape would come. I already knew it would look at the camera. I already knew it would leave. And it did. The same measured press of the bar. The same inch-wide gap of impossible black. The same silhouette stepping through as if it had been permitted. But the second time, it stayed longer in the corridor. It didn't look into the camera right away. It stood beneath the sign, and I saw something I hadn't seen before. A faint shimmer in the air around it, like heat distortion. Then it lifted one long arm and reached toward the wall opposite the door. Its hand met the painted surface. The paint darkened under its touch. Not wet, not stained. As if the wall itself had been cooled from the inside, losing warmth in a spreading circle. The shape held its palm there for 3 seconds, then withdrew. The circle remained, a slightly darker patch in the corridor that wasn't shadow and wasn't moisture. Then it turned its head toward the camera and held my gaze through glass and wire and distance, calm as gravity. And then it left again. I watched it go, and the moment the door clicked shut, I realized my hands were shaking so badly that the desk keys were rattling. I told myself it was a trick of light, a glitch, a prank, a person in a black suit, a faulty feed. But every explanation broke the moment I remembered the gap in the door. The darkness on the other side hadn't been a dark hallway. It had been a kind of void, a depthless black that swallowed the corridor light without reflecting any of it back. It was a doorway into somewhere that didn't agree with our lighting. After my shift ended at dawn, Keen arrived with his coffee and his tired eyes and asked, without looking at me, "Did you see it?" I nodded. Keen didn't react. He just moved to the logbook and flipped it open, scanning my entry. "Good," he said quietly. "You didn't check." "I saw it touch the wall," I said, voice rough. "It left a mark." Keen's jaw tightened. "It's taking measurements," he said. "Of what?" Keen looked up then, and for the first time I saw real fear in his expression. Something he kept buried under routine. Of us, he said, of how much of this place is still ours. I wanted to tell him I quit, wanted to hand back the keys and leave the building while the sun was up and reality still felt firm. But I didn't. Because I needed money, and because there was a sick curiosity in me that I hated. Because the thing had looked into the camera like it knew I was watching, and I wanted to know what it wanted. That was my third mistake. By the end of the week, I knew the pattern. The emergency exit sign activated 3 to 5 times per night, always after midnight, never before. It stayed lit between 2 and 7 minutes, as if the door was being held open by permission, even when it was physically closed. The shape came and went every time. It never entered the building. It never wandered the corridors. It always stepped out from inside, paused, performed its little check, and then stepped back into the darkness beyond the door, as if the building itself were the outside. I stopped sleeping properly. On my days off, I stared at doors too long. I found myself scanning exit signs in shopping centers, feeling my stomach tighten when they glowed. I started keeping my phone screen dimmed at night because bright light felt like an invitation. Then, on a Tuesday, the pattern shifted. At 12:04 a.m., the sign lit. I watched the camera feed, forcing calm. The bar pressed. The door opened. Darkness spilled through the gap, but nothing stepped out. The door stayed open, just a few inches, holding that slice of void like a wound that wouldn't close. I waited. 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes. The hallway remained empty. My throat tightened, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. Then something emerged, not from the gap, but from the darkness itself, as if it were condensing right at the threshold. A hand appeared first, long fingers, too thin, with joints that bent in a gentle curve. Not claws, not monstrous, just wrong in proportion, like a human hand drawn from memory by something that didn't have hands, the fingers wrapped around the edge of the door. Then the hand pulled. The door opened wider, and the darkness behind it didn't change. It didn't reveal a room. It didn't show a stairwell. It stayed black, as if the door opened into a depthless absence. The hand held the door open for a moment. Then, very slowly, it withdrew. The door began to swing back on its hinges. Just before it closed, I saw something behind the gap. Something pale and vertical, like a face pressed close to the opening. Not a face I could make out, a surface, a suggestion of skin or bone. Then the door clicked shut. The sign stayed lit for another 30 seconds, then went dark. I realized I was standing. At some point, I had risen from my chair without noticing. My palms were sweaty, my heart hammered. I sat down hard and forced myself to log it. 12:04 a.m. Exit sign activated. Door opened. No visible subject exit. Hand observed. Door manipulated. The words looked ridiculous on paper. They looked like the notes of a person losing their mind. I rubbed my face and stared at the monitors, trying not to imagine what would happen if that hand ever pulled the door open all the way. At 1:39 a.m., the sign lit again. The door opened. This time, the shape stepped out immediately. It paused beneath the sign. It turned its head toward the camera. And then it did something it had never done before. It took one step toward the interior, one measured, quiet step into the corridor. The air on the camera seemed to thicken. The hallway lights dimmed slightly, as if their brightness had been reduced by proximity. The shape stood there, halfway between exit and inside, like it was testing a boundary. Then it turned back and stepped through the door, It left. The door closed. But the sign stayed on longer than it should have. 7 minutes. 8. 10. I stared at it, feeling my stomach sink with the certainty that the rules had changed. When the sign finally went dark, I found myself whispering in the empty security office. "What are you doing?" The building didn't answer, but at 2:22 a.m., the office phone rang. It hadn't rung in days, not since I unplugged it. I'd left it sitting dead on the desk because Keen had told me not to answer calls from inside the building. I'd laughed at that one too once. Now the phone rang anyway. Shrill. Impossible. I stared at it like it was a snake. It rang 6 times. Stopped. Rang again. The monitors flickered once, subtly, like someone had brushed a finger over the image. On the corridor feed, the emergency exit sign glowed. The door remained closed. The phone rang a 3rd time. I didn't answer. My own voice, quiet, gentle, came from the phone speaker. "Open it." I froze, throat locking. The voice spoke again, a fraction louder. "It's safe. Open it." I reached for the phone's power cable, intending to rip it out. The voice became irritated. Still my voice, but flattened. "Don't make this hard," it said. I yanked the cable. The phone went silent. I sat shaking, staring at my hands. A soft click sounded from the corridor, not through the monitors, through the building itself. I looked up. On the camera feed, the panic bar depressed. The door opened a few inches. Darkness spilled through. The silhouette stepped out. It paused beneath the sign. And then, for the first time, it did not look into the camera. It looked down the corridor, toward the security office, toward me. A cold weight settled in my chest. The shape took one step forward, then another. It moved with that same patient inevitability, as if it had all the time in the world and all the right to use it. I watched it approach on the monitors, unable to move. My brain screamed at my body to run, but the office was a box of glass. The only exits were doors. Doors meant hallways. Hallways meant it. The silhouette stopped in the middle of the corridor, halfway between the emergency exit and my office. It lifted its arm and touched the wall again. Another dark circle spread under its palm. Then it withdrew and continued walking. I stood up so fast my chair nearly toppled. My hands fumbled for the keys, the radio, anything useful. The radio crackled, and Keen's voice, croaky, tired, came through. "You seeing this?" he asked. I stared at the radio in my hand, surprised. "Keen, you're not here." "I know," he said, voice tight. "Listen to me. Don't lock the office door." My stomach dropped. "What?" "Don't lock it," he repeated. "If you lock it, it'll think you're hiding." "It's coming toward me," I hissed. "I know," Keen said. "It wants you to open the exit." My breath hitched. On the monitor, the silhouette stopped again, closer now. It tilted its head, as if listening. "Why me?" I whispered. Keen's voice softened, and for a moment, he sounded almost sympathetic. "Because you watched," he said. "Because you logged it. Because you learned the pattern. It thinks you're part of the building now." The silhouette resumed moving. I could hear nothing from the corridor itself, but on the camera feed, it advanced with terrible calm. Keen's voice sharpened. "Get to the stairwell," he said. "Not the main stairs, the service stairs, level 2, door C." I hesitated. "That's near the exit," I said. "It's the only way out that doesn't pass it," Keen replied. "Move now." I grabbed my torch and my keys and stepped out of the security office into the corridor. The air hit me like a damp cloth. The hallway lights seemed dimmer in person. The glow from the emergency exit sign at the far end looked brighter, more aggressive. I swallowed, forcing myself to breathe. The corridor was empty, no silhouette. My skin crawled. How could it be empty if I'd just seen it on the monitor? Then I realized, with sick clarity, that I'd stepped out of the security office and into a blind angle. The cameras didn't cover everything. They never did. I moved quickly, shoes whispering on carpet, toward door C. The corridor bent slightly. A corner, a section of wall that hid the emergency exit from the view. As I approached that corner, the air grew colder. Not a draft, not air conditioning. A cold that felt concentrated, as if the building itself had forgotten how to hold heat. My torch beam shook on the wall. Tap, tap, tap. The sound came from ahead, not loud, intimate, as if someone were tapping their fingers on the wall in thought. I froze. The tapping stopped. Silence. Then my voice, soft and reasonable, spoke from around the corner. "I can't open it without you." My stomach rolled. I backed up one step. The voice continued, calm. "You work here. You know the rules. Open it." A faint sound followed, metal shifting softly, like the panic bar being touched. My throat tightened. I forced myself forward, one step at a time, torch beam held steady like it could keep reality in place. I rounded the corner. The corridor ahead was empty, but the emergency exit door was open, wider than I'd ever seen it, not inches, a full foot. Enough for a person to walk through without turning sideways. The darkness beyond it was absolute. It swallowed the corridor light so completely that the edges of the doorway looked like they were cut out of the world. And standing beside the open door was the silhouette. Closer in person, it was worse. The absence of detail made my eyes ache. The air around it shimmered faintly, like heat above asphalt. It didn't cast a shadow. It didn't reflect light. It existed as a gap in the world's assumptions. Its head turned toward me slowly, no eyes. Still I felt its gaze. It lifted one long arm and pointed toward the open doorway. My voice spoke again, but it wasn't coming from the silhouette. It came from inside the darkness, from beyond the door. "Just push," it said gently. "Just let it open all the way." My legs wanted to run. My body screamed no. But something else, deep and ugly, pulled at me. A compulsion as simple as gravity. The urge to complete a motion, to finish the opening, to satisfy a rule I didn't understand. The silhouette stood beside the door like an attendant, waiting for me to do the final thing. I took one involuntary step forward. The cold sharpened. My breath fogged thick. Inside the darkness, something moved, subtle, like a pale shape shifting behind a curtain. My throat tightened. I raised my torch and aimed it into the doorway. The beam vanished. It didn't scatter. It didn't reflect. It simply ceased the moment it crossed the threshold. The darkness ate light. A soft sound came from within. A breath. Not human, not animal. A long inhale that felt like the building itself drawing air through a wound. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Impossible, no signal. I pulled it out with shaking hands. The screen lit. Altitude, unknown location, inside. Underneath it, a new message typed itself, letter by letter. "Open it." My hands went numb. I dropped the phone. It hit the carpet and kept glowing, the message steady and patient. The silhouette moved then. It stepped slightly away from the door, giving me space, like it was offering me the honor of doing it myself. My voice came again from inside the dark, warmer now. "You already understand," it said. The exit is for emergencies. This is an emergency." A faint chuckle followed, a sound like my nervous laugh. "My building," the voice whispered. "My door. My rules." My stomach turned as I realized the voice wasn't just mimicking me. It was learning the way I convinced myself. It was using my own patterns of thought as leverage. I backed away from the doorway, shaking my head. "No," I said out loud. The voice in the darkness sighed, patient. "Okay," it said. "Then we'll do it another way." The emergency exit sign flickered brighter. The door, which had been held open at a foot's width, began to open further on its own, slowly, smoothly. The panic bar was not being pressed. The hinges moved anyway. The doorway widened, revealing more of that absolute darkness. The air spilled out colder and heavier, smelling faintly of wet stone and something metallic beneath. My heart hammered. The silhouette didn't move. It simply stood beside the widening door as if supervising. The voice inside the dark spoke again, more distant now, as if it were stepping back into a larger space. "We don't like hiding," it said. "We like exits." The door continued to open. 2 feet. 3. Enough to walk through comfortably. The darkness seemed to throb, not with light, but with absence, like an eye widening. I felt my body pull toward it, a subtle lean forward, like gravity had tilted. My feet shifted without my permission. I grabbed the wall for balance, fingers scraping paint. The wall under my hand felt slightly damp. I looked down and saw a dark circle spreading where my fingertips touched. The same mark the silhouette had left. Cold bloomed into my skin like ink. I jerked my hand away with a gasp. The silhouette turned its head toward my hand, as if pleased. It had marked me. I realized then what the wall touches had been. It wasn't measuring the building. It was tagging points, claiming surfaces, like mapping ownership. And now it had tagged me. The door opened fully. The emergency exit stood wide, the sign blazing above it like a command. The darkness beyond was so deep, it felt like looking into a tunnel that had no end, just distance that never became detail. And in that distance, I saw movement. Not one thing, many. Shapes shifting in layers, pale and dark, as if a crowd was standing in a place without light, watching through a doorway. My throat clenched around a sound that wasn't quite a scream. The voice from inside spoke softly, almost kind. "You can go first," it said. I backed away, shaking violently, and ran. I ran down the corridor toward door C, toward the service stairs, toward any exit that was still ordinary. Behind me, I heard nothing. No footsteps, no chase. Just the quiet, inevitable sound of the emergency exit door closing. A soft click, and then 3 taps on the wall. Tap, 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 close. Not behind me, inside my head. I hit door C and shoved it open with trembling hands. The stairwell beyond was dark, lit only by a single red emergency light that made everything look like dried blood. The air in the stairwell smelled old, like dust and closed spaces. I stumbled inside and pulled the door shut. I did not lock it. Keen's warning echoed. "If you lock it, it'll think you're hiding." I started down the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. My breathing was loud. My boots thudded. Halfway down, the lights flickered. The stairwell plunged into near darkness for a heartbeat, then returned to red. On the landing below, a phone mounted on the wall began to ring. A gray emergency handset, dusty and ignored, suddenly alive. It rang once, twice. I stopped, staring at it. It rang a 3rd time. My stomach clenched. My voice came from the handset without me touching it. "You can't leave," it said calmly. "The exit is open." I backed away, heart hammering. The handset continued, conversational. "You work here, you watched, you logged. You're part of the building now." I turned and ran again. I didn't stop until I burst out onto level 1, into the service corridor that connected to the loading dock. The corridor was long and industrial, lined with pipes and cable trays, smelling of metal and cold concrete. The fluorescent lights here buzzed louder, harsher, as if trying to compensate for the darkness elsewhere. I ran toward the loading dock exit. It was a standard door with a push bar and a keypad. I slapped my badge against the reader. Red light. Denied. I tried again. Denied. My throat tightened. "No, no, no!" The keypad beeped once, a flat tone. On the wall beside the door, a small sign read, "After midnight, use emergency exit only." I stared at it, nausea rising. That sign hadn't been there before. Or it had, and I'd never noticed it. Either way, it felt newly placed, like the building was rewriting itself to make the rule official. Behind me, in the corridor, the fluorescent lights flickered. A section of them went dark in a wave, moving toward me like an approaching shadow. I backed away from the loading dock door and moved deeper into the corridor, away from the dark wave, away from the emergency exit that was waiting somewhere behind the walls. The darkness moved steadily, light by light, swallowing brightness with patient certainty. I ran, again, heart pounding, following the corridor toward the office block, toward the security desk, toward the monitors, toward information, toward control. As I ran, I began to hear tapping. Tap, tap, tap. Not on one surface, on many. Pipes, walls, door frames, like multiple fingertips testing the building's skin. And then mixed with the tapping, I heard the sound of a door opening. A soft metal creak. Not the loading dock door, not any door in the corridor. The emergency exit. The tapping stopped. Silence fell like a weight. I slowed, breath tearing in my throat, and realized the building had gone too quiet. That's when I heard footsteps, not mine, not echo. Measured steps coming from behind, steady and unhurried. I ran without looking back. I burst into the security office and slammed the glass door behind me, locking it on instinct. The moment the lock clicked, I knew I'd done the wrong thing. Keen's voice in my head. "Don't lock it, it'll think. You're hiding." The corridor camera feed on my monitor flickered and then stabilized. The emergency exit sign glowed. The door stood open, and the silhouette stepped out, not alone. Behind it, in the doorway, another shape hovered, paler, closer to human outline, but wrong in posture, as if it were wearing a person's stance without knowing why. Then another, a line of shapes forming, waiting at the threshold. The building had stopped letting one out at a time. It had escalated. The office phone on the desk, unplugged, began to ring again. And this time, I didn't have to look at it to know what the display would say. Me. I backed away from the desk, pressing myself against the glass wall like it could protect me. The phone rang 6 times, stopped. Then my voice spoke from the handset, gentle as a friend. "Open the door," it said. "Don't hide." My stomach clenched. The silhouette in the corridor began walking toward the security office. On the monitor, its approach was calm, inevitable. Behind it, the other shapes remained at the emergency exit, watching, waiting. The silhouette reached the spot in the corridor where it had touched the wall before. It stopped. It placed its palm against the wall again. A dark circle bloomed. Then it withdrew and continued walking. Each time it touched the wall, it was leaving a mark, closer and closer to my office, claiming a path, claiming a route. The phone rang again, my voice. "You can't stay in there forever." My throat burned. I was shaking so hard my teeth clicked. The silhouette reached the glass door of the office and stopped. It tilted its head. Then it lifted one long finger and tapped the glass. Tap, tap, tap. The sound reverberated through my bones. The glass did not crack, but the air on my side of the glass cooled instantly, as if the tap had transferred cold through the barrier. I watched on the monitor and in real life, my mind splitting between perspectives. The silhouette tapped again, slower. Tap, tap, tap. Then it pressed its palm to the glass. The glass fogged instantly, not from warmth, but from cold, a pale haze blooming outward from its hand. In that fog, a shape began to form. Not a handprint, a word, emerging as if the cold was writing. Open, my stomach dropped. The silhouette removed its hand. The fog remained, the word visible like a command. Then the silhouette turned its head slightly, looking past the glass, past me, as if listening to something deeper in the building. The emergency exit sign on the monitor blazed brighter. The other shapes at the doorway began to shift. One of them stepped out into the corridor, then another, then another. A slow procession, silent, filing into the building like they had been waiting for permission to expand. My voice on the phone became pleased. "There," it said softly. "That's better." The silhouette at my door lifted its arm and reached toward the lock, not with a hand, with a long finger that hovered inches from the mechanism. The lock clicked. It turned, not physically, but as if it had been convinced. The glass door unlocked itself with a gentle sound. I stared in disbelief. The silhouette did not enter. It waited, inviting. My voice on the phone, "Don't make us come in." I stood frozen. If I ran, where would I go? Every ordinary exit had been denied. The building had rewritten its rules after midnight. The emergency exit was the only approved route, and the emergency exit wasn't an exit. It was a mouth. The corridor outside my office had grown darker. The overhead lights flickered, dimming in pulses as the procession of shapes advanced slowly, filling the hallway with wrong silhouettes. They didn't hurry. They didn't need to. They knew the building was theirs now, and I was the only thing left that still believed in doors. The silhouette at my office door tapped. The glass again, lightly. Tap, tap, tap. Then it stepped aside, making space, like it expected me to come out. The voice on the phone softened. "It's okay," it said. "It's just a corridor." A memory hit me then, Keen leaning close on my first day, his breath smelling of coffee. After midnight, it belongs to something else. I understood what he'd meant. The emergency exit wasn't used by the thing. It was used by the building to let the thing in, to exchange ownership. After midnight, the building let the outside become the inside. The silhouette in front of me wasn't leaving, it was arriving, and it wanted me to be the one to make that official, to step out, to acknowledge the corridor as mine no longer, to take the rule into my body. My hand shook as I reached for the logbook on the desk. If I was going to die, I wanted to leave evidence, something concrete, something human. I flipped it open and grabbed the pen. The pen trembled in my grip. I wrote, 2:31 a.m. Emergency exit sign active. Door opened. Multiple subjects observed. Approaching security office. Office door unlocked without key. Subject requesting access. I am... The pen stopped. The ink stopped. The line went blank. I stared at the page in horror. The words I'd written were disappearing, fading like damp paper drying. The building was erasing my record, My voice came from the phone, amused. "No more logs," it said. "You're not the guard anymore." I backed away from the desk, panicked, and the glass door of the office swung open silently on its own. The silhouette stood just outside, waiting. Beyond it, the corridor was filled with dim shapes standing under failing lights, patient as a cue. My mouth went dry. I realized then that none of them were looking around. None of them were curious about the building. They were all facing the same direction, facing me, like an audience, like witnesses. The silhouette extended its hand, long fingers open, palm up, not aggressive, inviting, and from the corridor behind it, a sound began, soft at first, then spreading, tapping, tap, 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 dozens of surfaces, pipes, walls, door frames, glass, a chorus of checks, the building measuring my hesitation. The voice from inside the darkness, my voice, whispered with gentle insistence, "You can run." A pause. "But you can't hide." My blood went colder. That was one of the rules from another story, one I'd joked about to myself while scrolling horror threads at 3 a.m. The words landed like a hook in my spine. It wasn't quoting internet horror. It was quoting the way fear repeats itself across people. It was using any shape of language that fit. The silhouette's hand remained extended. My legs shook. I took one step forward without deciding to. The corridor lights flickered and steadied, as if encouraged. I took another step. The silhouette's fingers closed gently around my wrist. Cold stabbed into my skin, and I gasped. The grip was not crushing. It was precise, like a cuff. The silhouette guided me into the corridor. Behind it, the other shapes remained still, watching as if the ceremony had begun. My voice on the phone spoke softly, almost tender. "Good," it said. "Now walk to the door." My throat tightened. I tried to pull back. The silhouette's grip tightened slightly, just enough to remind me resistance existed. Then it guided me forward again, toward the emergency exit. The corridor seemed longer than it had before. The walls felt closer, the ceiling lower, the air colder with every step. Each time we passed one of the dark circles on the wall, I felt a pulse of cold in my chest, like the building acknowledging the path. Keen's voice crackled suddenly through my radio in my pocket. "Don't," he said urgently. "Don't go through it." I froze. The silhouette stopped. The corridor shape shifted, attention sharpening. The tapping stopped instantly. Silence fell. Keen's voice came again, strained. "If you go through, you don't come back the same. You hear me? You don't come back." The silhouette turned its head toward my pocket, toward the radio, as if listening. My own voice came from somewhere in the corridor, not from a phone this time, but from the building's air itself. "Keen," it said with mild irritation, "you're not scheduled." A pause. Then Keen's voice, weaker, as if something had squeezed it. "Please," he whispered. "Please don't." The radio crackled and then went dead with a wet, choking sound that wasn't electrical. The silhouette resumed walking, pulling me with it. I stumbled, heart pounding, tears stinging my eyes from cold and panic. We reached the emergency exit. The sign above it blazed bright enough to hurt. The door stood open. The darkness beyond it was wider now, not a gap, but a full doorway into absence. I stared into it, and my torch beam, still clipped to my belt, didn't even try. The darkness seemed to breathe. A long inhale, pulling corridor air toward it. The silhouette guided me to the threshold. Its hand on my wrist tightened, anchoring me. My voice spoke from inside the dark, warm, and familiar. "Step through," it said. "Just once, then it'll be done." I shook my head violently, tears slipping down my cheeks. The silhouette paused, then lifted its other hand and placed its palm gently against my chest. Cold spread through my shirt like water. My heart stuttered. The cold didn't feel like frost. It felt like my body's warmth being claimed, like a transaction. In the corridor behind me, the other shapes began tapping again, slower now, like a countdown. Tap, tap, tap. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. A rhythm that felt like instruction. My voice inside the dark softened. "You're tired," it said. "You want an exit. Everyone wants an exit." I swallowed hard, throat raw. The silhouette's grip guided my hand toward the panic bar. My fingers hovered inches from it. The bar looked ordinary, metal, scuffed, a thing you could touch, a thing that existed in reality. I could feel my mind clinging to that, desperate. If I touched the bar, if I pressed it, the door would open further. But the door was already open. So, what did pressing the bar do? It wasn't about opening, it was about consent. I realized that with a flash of sick clarity. The door didn't need force. It needed me to agree it was a door. It needed me to confirm the rule. Something uses the emergency exit after midnight, and something wanted me to be the one to say, yes, it does, it can. My fingers trembled inches from the bar. Tap, tap, tap. The tapping rhythm continued behind me. Then, softly, my voice came again from inside the dark, closer now, as if leaning into the doorway. "We won't hurt you," it whispered. A pause. "We'll just make sure you belong." My vision tunneled. My lungs burned. In the darkness, a pale shape shifted again. Something like a face, too close, pressed to the threshold like it was waiting for the last bit of permission. My fingers brushed the bar. Cold shot up my arm like an electric shock. I gasped and jerked back. The silhouette's grip tightened. It pulled my hand back to the bar, firmer this time. My voice inside the dark grew impatient. "Stop pretending," it said. "You've already been inside. You're already part of the building. This is just paperwork." The word paperwork made me almost laugh. Hysterical. Broken. Of course it would use corporate language. Of course it would reduce horror to procedure. That's how it learned us. That's how it made itself reasonable. My fingers pressed the bar. The bar depressed smoothly. The door opened further, not on hinges, but in perception, as if the doorway widened in my mind rather than physically. The darkness expanded. The corridor light behind me dimmed sharply. The air grew heavier, smelling of wet stone and metal and something like old breath. My stomach dropped as if the floor had tilted. The silhouette guided me forward. I fought, a broken animal resistance, and it didn't matter. At the threshold, I felt a pressure in my ears like altitude change, like going down too fast. My body wanted to retch. The darkness breathed in again, and I felt it pull at my skin. Then, from deep inside the dark, I heard something else. A sound like distant traffic, like a highway at night, like the world I'd left outside. It was close enough to be cruel. My voice whispered, gentle again. "There," it said. "Hear that? That's outside. That's where you wanted to go." The silhouette stepped forward, bringing me with it. My foot crossed the threshold. The moment it did, the cold became total. Not pain, absence. Like all warmth had been removed from the universe. My torchlight died instantly. The corridor behind me vanished, swallowed. For a heartbeat, I existed in blackness so complete that my eyes had nothing to latch onto. I couldn't tell if my eyes were open. Then, dimly, something appeared. Not light, a faint geometry, lines and angles like the suggestion of hallways made of shadow, a corridor that wasn't a corridor, a space that implied structure without containing it. And there were doors, dozens, emergency exit doors, all identical, floating in that dark space like entries on a list. Each door had a sign above it, emergency exit, all of them lit green, all of them waiting. The silhouette's grip on my wrist remained, though I couldn't see it. I felt it as cold pressure. My voice spoke from everywhere at once, calm and satisfied. "Now you understand," it said. "We don't leave your buildings. We move between them." My stomach turned. "This is..." I tried to speak, and my breath came out as fog, impossible in darkness. The voice continued, conversational. "Sometimes a building gets too empty," it said. "Sometimes the lights stay on too long. Sometimes people forget the rules. So we use the exits. We keep the corridors connected." I shook my head, tears freezing on my cheeks. "Why?" I croaked. The grip on my wrist tightened slightly. The voice paused, as if considering a simple answer. "Because you built doors," it said, "and you believed they belonged to you." A low sound followed, like a laugh without humor. Then, "Walk." The darkness shifted. One of the floating doors ahead began to open. Not from a bar press. It opened because it was being acknowledged. A thin crack of black, black within black, appeared, and from it came a different smell. Oil, salt, rain, a hint of fluorescent light, a different building, a different corridor, a different midnight. My body leaned forward unwillingly, drawn by the new opening, like gravity had found a new direction. The voice in my head softened again, almost kind. "You'll be useful," it whispered. "You can open doors from the inside. That's what we needed." My throat tightened. "No," I whispered. The silhouette's grip pulled me toward the opening door, and as I moved, I heard it, faint, distant, familiar. A phone ringing, somewhere, not in this dark space, in a building beyond one of the doors, ringing for someone who didn't know the rule yet. My voice, no longer mine, whispered with quiet certainty. "Emergency." Tap, tap, tap. Then, on the other side of the opening door, an exit sign flickered to life.